Why did he pull away? Why did someone who once seemed so interested, who sought your company, who made you feel seen and valued, now act as if you never mattered at all? That question, it begins to echo louder and louder in the quiet spaces of your mind, doesn't it? You scramble for reasons. Did I say something wrong? Was I too available? Did I come on too strong, maybe without even realizing it? You dissect every interaction, every text message, every shared glance, searching for the moment, the action, the flaw that could explain this sudden, painful distance. But the truth is, while we search for answers within ourselves, often the real reason lies far beyond our actions. It's a difficult truth to accept because it means giving up the illusion of control, the idea that if only we were perfect, this wouldn't have happened. But hear this, and let it settle deep within your soul. The problem in reality is not you, it is him. And understanding that changes absolutely everything. Society has sold us an image of men as cold, self-assured figures, immune to emotional turmoil. They tell us men don't suffer in the same ways we do, that when they disappear, they're simply moving on, straightforward and unfeeling. But that is one of the most damaging lies ever perpetuated. Because a man's indifference is not always disinterest. Sometimes, often, it is a mask. Sometimes, it is an internal storm disguised as a deceptive calm. When a man ignores you, when he chooses to distance himself without explanation, without closure, the logical assumption is that he is simply no longer interested. And sometimes, yes, that is the case. But stop for a moment and really think about it. If you genuinely meant nothing to him, if you were simply irrelevant in his life, would he need to demonstrate it with such emphasis? Would he need to vanish in such a deliberate, noticeable way? If you were truly irrelevant, his absence would be neutral, almost imperceptible. He wouldn't feel the need to make it known that he is no longer there. But when that silence carries a tone, an intention, a carefully calculated void, that is where the truth begins to reveal itself. A man who pretends indifference is, in reality, wrestling with what he feels. It is likely he is overwhelmed by emotions he doesn't know how to handle. From a young age, many men are taught to repress their feelings. Don't cry. Don't be weak. Men don't fall in love, they conquer. And when they finally meet someone who stirs them from within, who touches parts of their being they didn't know existed, panic appears. The instinct for self-preservation kicks in, and they decide to pull away. Not because they don't care about you, but because you matter to them more than they can control. The profound irony is that this withdrawal, this strategy of coldness, is not a sign of strength. On the contrary, it is their greatest weakness exposed. A man truly at peace with himself, comfortable in his own skin and with his emotions, does not need to disappear. He is not afraid to face what he feels, much less afraid to face the woman who awakened those feelings. But the man who resorts to silence, he is confessing, without uttering a single word, that he doesn't know how to handle himself in the face of intensity. And here is where many women, often without even realizing it, make their first crucial mistake. They try to decipher him, but they do it from a place of pain. They begin to overanalyze everything. The message that took hours to respond to. The call he never returned. The subtle shift in his body language. Every tiny gesture becomes a clue, a piece in this emotional puzzle they are desperately trying to solve. But this game is fundamentally unfair. It's stacked against you from the start. Why? Because not all the pieces are on the table. Because he himself doesn't know what he feels, and yet, he expects you to guess what even he doesn't understand. This is a recipe for exhaustion and heartache. The question then should no longer be, what did I do wrong? It must transform into, why am I taking responsibility for what he cannot manage? Instead of pouring your precious energy into trying to make him react, to make him come back, to make him talk, the most powerful thing you can possibly do is simply stop reacting. Stop feeding the game. Because when you cease to react to his indifference, when you continue living your life without seeking his validation, without chasing answers, that is when the balance of power irrevocably shifts. You see, the real fear of a man who chooses to ignore is not losing you in the physical sense. It is the fear that you will stop caring, that your silence will become louder than his, that your distance will no longer be a punishment inflicted upon you, but a choice freely made by you, that you will no longer wait, that you will no longer feel for him. And when that happens, his greatest strategy is reversed directly against him. But to reach that point, that place of quiet power, you first have to internalize this truth. You were not the cause of his absence. His silence does not speak of your value. It speaks of his incapacity. A man who feels deeply but does not act, who desires connection but does not build towards it, does not need to be deciphered. He needs to be let go. Because ultimately, his indifference doesn't say, "You don't matter to me." It says with painful clarity, "I don't know how to handle what I feel for you." And that is not a problem you are meant to solve. It is a problem he must face on his own, or risk losing you for his inability to do so. Most men are simply not prepared to feel deeply. This is a truth rarely spoken aloud, but it manifests in every evasive behavior, in every silence heavy with unspoken emotions, in every disappearance that leaves behind more questions than answers. From childhood, many boys are raised under the intense pressure not to show vulnerability. They are taught that being strong is synonymous with not feeling, that emotional control is more valuable than sincere expression, that falling in love can somehow be a threat to their independence. So, when a woman appears who awakens something real within them, something they cannot control, something they cannot predict, the very first thing they feel is not happiness. It is fear. This fear is the origin of most of their contradictions. Because they like being close to you, but they are terrified of the depth of what they feel when they are close. Because they feel more alive with you than they have in a long time. But that vitality comes with a frightening vulnerability. Because they cherish what you shared, but they don't know if they are equipped, if they are man enough by their societal conditioning to sustain it. And when that internal contradiction grows too overwhelming, they seek the easiest way out: silence. But behind that silence, there is a fierce internal battle raging. They are not at peace, even if they project an image of serenity. They are not self-assured, even if they want to appear unshakable. The indifference they show towards you is not a lack of feelings. It is a desperate attempt to flee from them. Because when they sense that they are losing control, when they realize that you are beginning to matter to them more than they anticipated, their defense system activates. It is then that the sudden distancing emerges. They might disappear for days, change their tone of voice, become cold for no apparent reason. Not because they stopped feeling for you, but precisely because they feel too much. And the worst part, often they aren't even consciously aware of why they are doing it. They just know that something inside them has been destabilized, and because they don't know how to face it, they choose to run. Indifference becomes their shield, their safe zone, their strategy to regain control. But there is something crucial they fail to grasp. Running away doesn't resolve what they feel. It only postpones it. And in that process, they run the very real risk of losing the person who has touched their soul the most profoundly. Because a woman can understand many things. She can be empathetic. She can be patient. She can even be tolerant in the beginning, offering grace and understanding. But when this pattern of flight repeats, when the connection begins to erode due to a lack of consistent presence, when distance becomes a habit he enforces, the woman changes. The great error of many men is thinking they can keep disappearing without consequence. That they can play with absence without losing the interest of the other person. That their silence will always generate intrigue, leaving you wanting more. But that only works while the woman is still emotionally invested, while she still believes there is something real, something worth waiting for. But once she truly begins to look elsewhere, the dynamic changes forever. The most tragic part of all this is that, in the majority of cases, the man isn't ignoring you because you don't matter. He is doing it because he doesn't know how to process what he feels. He doesn't know how to be vulnerable without feeling like he is losing power. He doesn't know how to say, "You matter deeply to me," without feeling that this admission leaves him exposed and weak. So he prefers to stay silent, to hide behind indifference, to convince himself that this is how he maintains control. But what he doesn't understand, cannot see from within his fear, is that while he is running from his emotions, you are learning to live without him. While he convinces himself that distance makes him stronger, you are discovering that you do not need someone who cannot stand firm, someone who cannot stay. While he distances himself out of fear of losing himself in what he feels, you are reclaiming your center, your peace, your radiant clarity. And when he finally realizes the emptiness he created, the space where you used to be, it may already be too late. Because a woman who has learned to live without someone who didn't know how to value her presence does not go back. Not out of pride, but because she has understood on a soul level that she does not deserve to beg for what should be natural. Presence, honesty, a consistent connection. True strength is not in disappearing. It is in staying and facing what you feel. It is in looking directly into the eyes of the person who moves your soul and saying, I don't know exactly how to handle all this, but I want to try. I want to build this with you. That is what differentiates a man who is emotionally available from one who lives trapped in the prison of his own fears. And here is where many women must pause. A deep, necessary pause. And ask yourself, am I waiting for someone who genuinely has the emotional capacity to hold space for what I offer? Or am I investing my precious energy, my hope, my time, in someone who, even if he desires me, fundamentally does not know how to have me? Because feeling something for someone is not enough if you do not have the courage, the maturity, the willingness to build something real from that feeling. When someone you cared about deeply pulls away without explanation, the most human, most natural response is to seek a reason. You yearn to understand, to find closure, to know exactly when, according to you, things went wrong. You revisit past conversations, analyze his last messages, replay scenes in your mind again and again, trying desperately to pinpoint the exact moment where, in your perception, things broke down. But this constant search for logic in the behavior of someone who is emotionally disconnected is utterly exhausting. It is like trying to find stability in the midst of an earthquake. The truth is, there isn't always a clear, clean reason that makes sense to you. Sometimes the other person is simply not ready. Sometimes it is not about you at all, not about what you did or what you said or what you offered. Sometimes you are simply standing across from someone who does not know how to hold space for the depth and readiness that you are prepared to offer. And this is where one of the most powerful decisions you can ever make comes into play. To stop reacting. Yes, to simply stop. Stop searching. Stop waiting. Stop interpreting every single sign. Do this not as a strategy to make him come back, but as a profound act of respect towards yourself. Because every time you respond to his indifference with anxiety, with fear, with a desperate need for explanations, you are handing him power. You are confirming that his tactic is working. Indifference only has an effect when you acknowledge it, when you decide that what he does or fails to do has a direct impact on your emotional state, on your worth. But the moment you truly understand, deep in your bones, that his absence does not define your value, everything shifts. What once hurt begins to liberate you. What once confused you now brings radical clarity. Because you are no longer interpreting his silence as rejection of you, but as an expression of his incapacity. And another person's incapacity is simply not your burden to carry. Here is where the focus gloriously, powerfully, completely inverts. It is no longer about him. It is about you. What will you do with this situation? Will you continue to wait for answers that may never arrive? Or will you begin, right now, to build from the absolute certainty that you do not need anyone else to confirm your inherent value? When you decide not to react, you are breaking the pattern. You are declaring, silently but powerfully, I will not play this game. And that is what most destabilizes someone who bases their power on your need to understand them, your need for their attention. Because, deep down, many men who act with indifference are not truly decided on leaving. They do it hoping you will take the initiative, that you will react, that you will try to solve the mess they created. Why? Because it feeds their ego. It confirms that they still occupy space in your mind, in your emotions, in your life. But when you don't do it, when you decide to continue with your own life, when you demonstrate that his absence does not halt your journey, something profound shifts within them. They begin to question if they have truly lost something important. The ego that led them to believe you would always be there begins to falter. because now they no longer feel so indispensable. They can no longer control the narrative. And this is where you reclaim your power. This is not about acting indifferent as a form of punishment. It is not emotional revenge. It is a sacred act of refocusing your energy, of ceasing to fuel one-sided connections, of looking inward and asking yourself, what do I need right now? Where is my peace? Who am I when I stop placing my worth in the hands of another person? When you stop reacting, you begin to live from a different place more centered, more conscious, more profoundly free. And in that new emotional space, his absence ceases to be a source of pain because you are no longer waiting for him to return. You are no longer searching for signs that will bring back the illusion of hope. You understand deeply, fundamentally, that the only validation you will ever need is your own. And that, my dear friend, is the most attractive thing a woman can possibly radiate. Emotional freedom. Men can ignore, they can pull away, they can disappear. But when you decide not to react, that indifference becomes utterly irrelevant. And there, without seeking it, without planning it, without manipulating any situation, you recover control. Not over him, but over you. And that is the true power. The power that does not need anyone to choose you to feel valuable. The power that is built, brick by conscious brick, when you stop waiting and simply begin to live. When a man acts from a place of indifference, most people assume he is in control, that his silence is a sign of strength, determination, absolute disinterest. But in reality, indifference is not a display of security. It is the exact opposite. It is a clear symptom that something deep within him is unstable, that there is a profound insecurity he needs to conceal. An emotionally mature man does not play games with silence. He does not need to prove his detachment to validate his independence. He is not afraid to communicate with clarity or to show what he feels. But the man who chooses to disappear, who opts to ignore, to send confusing signals, is acting from fear. The most common fear. The fear of not being enough. Many men believe, even if they never admit it aloud, that if they give too much, they will lose respect. That if they show vulnerability, they will be exposed, and in that state, someone could hurt them deeply. That's why they prefer to play from a distance, to stay in the comfortable zone of perceived control, to avoid the emotional terrain where feelings make them feel insecure, inadequate. And this insecurity isn't always obvious at first glance. Sometimes it's disguised as arrogance, as calculated silence, as a supposed coldness. But if you observe carefully, if you stop looking at him through the lens of your pain and begin to see him from the perspective of someone who is no longer waiting, you will notice that his behavior is not strength. It is protection. It is evasion. It is a desperate attempt not to face what he does not know how to manage within himself. That is why, when a man ignores you for no apparent reason, when he distances himself precisely at the point where the connection was deepening, instead of asking, "What did I do wrong?" ask yourself, "What is he unable to face?" Because often it is not about you. It is about everything you represent to him. You might awaken emotions in him that make him uncomfortable. You might see something in him that forces him to question his own limited view of himself. Perhaps you represent a type of connection that he never thought he was capable of having, and that dislodges him, shakes his foundations. Because, although he might deny it fiercely, many men are terrified of a woman having power over their emotions. And when they perceive that, they prefer to create distance. Not because they don't feel, but because they feel too much and it scares them. And here occurs one of the great paradoxes. While you are searching for external explanations, he is struggling internally to not be affected by you. While you are analyzing his silences, he is trying to convince himself that he is not losing control. But he is. Because every time he has to pretend that you don't matter to him, every time he needs to maintain distance to feel strong, he is confirming in the deepest part of his being that you do matter, that he does feel, but he simply doesn't know how to handle it. Then the power game appears. A game that didn't start with you, but with his own internal wounds. Perhaps in the past, he was rejected, betrayed, judged for showing emotion. Perhaps he learned that love is synonymous with loss, or that opening up completely means exposing himself to inevitable pain. That is why now, instead of building from genuine feeling, He builds from strategy, from emotional manipulation, from indifference as a defense mechanism. But there is something he does not see coming, and that is that you are not obligated to play his game. You can leave the table at any moment. You can simply say, clearly and calmly, "This is not for me," without resentment, without drama, just with radical clarity. Because a woman who has done the deep work on her self-esteem, who has learned not to depend emotionally on the behavior of others, is immune to emotional manipulation. Not because she doesn't feel, but because she chooses not to stay where there is no reciprocity, no authentic connection. And that is where his carefully constructed scheme breaks down. Because the man who plays with indifference expects you to react. He expects you to ask. He expects you to insist. But when you don't, his artificial security crumbles. He no longer has control. He can no longer predict your movements. Because your silence now is authentic. It is not a tactic. It is not an attempt to provoke anything. It is a consequence. It is what happens when someone simply gets tired. And that, for him, is more terrifying than any complaint, any argument, any emotional demand. Because a complaint implies you are still involved, that you still care, that you still expect an emotional response. But when your reaction is calm, when there is no longer expectation, when the desperate need to understand him ceases to exist, that is when he truly begins to question everything. And he does it from a place of insecurity. From the quiet fear of, am I losing her? From, why isn't she chasing me anymore? From, what changed? But what changed wasn't a specific moment or event. It was your energy, your focus, your willingness to keep fueling a dynamic that was not serving your highest good. And when a woman withdraws from that place, from a place of dignity, without bitterness, without needing to make noise or cause a scene, the man's indifference loses all its power. At first, the silence seems like a masterstroke on his part. He disappears. He shows up as absent, evasive, unavailable. And you naturally react with anxiety, with questions, with the urgent need to understand what is happening. And for him, this is confirmation that his strategy is working. He believes that the void he created is generating more desire, more attachment, even obsession. He believes that by withdrawing, he is making you want him more, making you feel more like he possesses your attention. And it's true. In the beginning, that silence hurts. It forces you to look inward, often critically, to question everything, to think you did something wrong, to assume his absence is a punishment for something you said, did, or didn't do. But with time, if you choose, consciously choose, not to get trapped in that painful narrative, something begins to shift. Because pain, when it is truly understood and processed, ceases to be a punishment and transforms into a profound lesson. And so, without even fully realizing it at first, you begin to let go. You stop checking your phone every 5 minutes, desperately hoping for a sign from him. You stop counting the days since you last spoke. You stop wondering if he still thinks about you. And instead, you begin, with intention, to focus on you, on your projects, on your passions, on your peace, on your life. And while you are returning to yourself, reclaiming your energy, he is likely still confident that his silence is having the desired effect. He believes his absence still weighs heavily on you, that you are still trapped in confusion and longing. But he does not know that time is not playing in his favor, because the more he distances himself, the further you place him in your mind, in your emotional landscape. The more he ignores, the more genuinely indifferent you become. The more silence he offers, the more you learn to love and embrace your own silence, your own peace. Until one day, inevitably, he realizes, you are no longer there. And it's not that you have physically disappeared. You are right here, alive, present. But emotionally, you are no longer available to him in the way you once were. There is no longer anxiety in your voice when he eventually reaches out. There are no pending questions that demand his answers. There is no longer space for a story that only he was keeping frozen in time. You have released it. And in that instant, his strategy shatters. Because silence only works as a manipulation tactic while you are actively waiting for something to break it. Once you stop waiting, that same silence becomes a barrier he cannot cross. He no longer knows how to return. He no longer knows what to say that holds any real weight for you. His last move was to do nothing, and now, he has no way to fix what he himself allowed to wither and die. And it is there, in that self-created void, that his internal crisis truly begins. He starts to replay every moment shared with you, but now, without the blinding arrogance of his ego. Now, the memory is accompanied by a profound sense of loss, of emptiness. He no longer has the certainty that you are on the other side, waiting. He no longer has that emotional control he believed he possessed. And the worst part, he no longer knows if a second chance is even possible. He starts writing messages he never sends. He checks your social media. He wonders if you are with someone else. Because now, the absence is not just yours. It is his too. He can no longer ignore you because you are no longer waiting to be acknowledged. He can no longer control you because you have liberated yourself from the need for his validation. And here, the power dynamic is completely, utterly reversed. What once made him feel strong now makes him feel lost. Because he discovers a truth he never considered. A woman does not wait forever. A woman does not insist forever. A woman does not stay forever where there is no reciprocity, no genuine connection, no presence. And now, it is he who feels that absence as a real, tangible loss. But by then, it is often too late. Because you didn't fall back into playing his game. You didn't dedicate your energy to returning his indifference with the same currency. You didn't block him out of anger or chase him out of desperation. You simply disappeared emotionally from the equation. And that, for him, is more disconcerting than anything else. Because a man can handle rejection. It is clear, direct, a situation he understands. But he doesn't know what to do with genuine indifference. Not the feigned kind, not the calculated kind, not the kind used as a tactic. Authentic indifference is a force he cannot control because it no longer affects him in the way he intended. Simply shifts the place he held in your life. He is no longer at the center. He is no longer a priority. He simply doesn't matter anymore. And it is in that vast, echoing void that he begins to feel what you once felt. The silence that he used as a weapon now returns to him as an echo that brings no answers, an echo that only repeats. She is no longer waiting, and that disarms him completely. Because, in the end, silence always has consequences. They just don't always arrive when you expect them. And for the man who ignores, the harshest consequence is not that you leave. It is that you leave without bitterness, without resentment, because that signifies, unequivocally, that there is nothing left to rescue. The moment always arrives. Perhaps not when you expected it. Perhaps not in the way you imagined. But it arrives. That message you thought you'd never receive. That unexpected phone call. That attempt at contact disguised as casualness. A reaction to an old social media post. A simple, "Hey, how have you been?" As if nothing happened. He wants to return. After weeks, maybe months of silence. After playing with your uncertainty. After convincing himself that his absence would keep you tethered to him. After betting that you would always be there. He decides to come back. But you are no longer the same woman he left behind. Because while he was choosing not to speak, you were choosing to let go. While he was betting on indifference, you were betting on yourself. While he kept his silence, you found your answers. And those answers didn't need to come from him. They came from your growth. From your maturity. From your profound inner awakening. And now, when he wants to return, you simply do not need him. That is what most bewilders him. Because his return is motivated by the fear of having lost you, but you are no longer waiting. His desire to reconnect no longer finds the version of you that used to be eagerly available. He no longer sees anxiety in your eyes. He no longer hears urgency in your voice. He only finds a quiet, unshakable calm. And that calm is, for him, unbearable. Because he expected a different reaction. He expected you to jump with joy, to ask him why he left, to open the door immediately as if nothing had happened. But instead, he encounters an invisible wall. Firm. Silent. The wall you built, brick by conscious brick. when you understood that you deserve more than crumbs of attention, that love is not something you beg for, that attention is not something you demand, and that real connection requires no tactics or games. And then, he begins to do what he never did before. He tries to explain himself. He tells you he was confused, that he was scared, that he didn't want to hurt you, that he needed time. But you are no longer in the same emotional place. Because while he was searching for excuses, you found crystal clarity. And now you see him with different eyes. Not with hatred, not with resentment, simply with emotional distance. The kind of distance that is built when a woman stops idealizing, stops projecting her hopes onto someone who wasn't truly there. There is no longer magic in his voice, no longer compelling force in his words, because what he says arrives too late, because it no longer touches the emotional fibers it once did, because his return does not repair what his silence eroded. You no longer want what you once wanted, because that desire came from a version of you that no longer exists. You know your value now. You know what you need. And he, unequivocally, is not it. And in that moment he feels it. He feels that he has lost you. That the woman who once reacted, who once searched, who once fought for him, now simply listens. Only, serene. Almost as if she has forgotten him. And in part it is true. Because forgetting is not always the absence of memory. Sometimes it is the absence of emotion, of desire, of desperate connection. And that is what he no longer finds in you. And here is the great irony. He left thinking you would be there waiting when he returned. He thought time was on his side. He thought his silence would keep you longing. But he did not count on your transformation, on your evolution, on your powerful capacity to let go and reclaim your own peace. And when he wants to return, you are no longer waiting. Because you learned, the hardest way perhaps, that what does not choose you does not deserve you. Now it is he who wants to know, who needs explanations, who wonders what happened. And you, without needing to explain anything, simply continue on your path. Because you understood that not all stories require a spoken closure. Some simply end when you decide not to open that door again. And that is what hurts him the most. Not your rejection, but your real indifference. The quiet certainty that you are not coming back, that you are not going to insist, that you are not going to try again. That there is no longer space for him in your life. And that is the ultimate consequence of his own strategy. Because whoever plays with distance must be prepared for the other person to learn, beautifully and powerfully, how to live without him. There is a moment in every woman's life when she realizes she no longer needs an explanation. Not because she has resigned herself to pain, but because she has finally, truly understood that silence, too, is a complete answer. And in that moment, something profoundly powerful occurs. The energy that was once directed outward, towards someone else, rushes back to her. And with that reclaimed energy, she recovers her center. It is no longer about pride. It is not a matter of vengeance or playing tit-for-tat with indifference. It is a natural, beautiful evolution. A process that begins with pain, yes, but that inevitably leads you to a much grander, more expansive state. Peace. A peace that does not need spoken closure from another person. A peace that does not depend on him returning or on him finally understanding what he lost. Because the woman who has healed no longer looks back with nostalgia or regret. She looks forward with clear, unwavering vision. She no longer expects the other person to change. It changed. And in that change, she realized that she does not need to reopen the door for someone who did not have the courage, the emotional maturity, to stay when it mattered most. And so, when he eventually tries to return, he no longer finds the same woman he left behind. That desperate need, that anxious waiting, that fragile expectation, it is gone. Because the silence he believed he controlled was transformed, by you, into his worst enemy. It became the sacred space you needed to reconstruct yourself. To understand that you do not need to beg for attention to feel valuable. And here comes the final liberating lesson. Indifference is not a strategy to generate desire. It is a choice made by someone who does not know how to hold space for what they feel. But the problem with playing the game of ignoring someone is that you may very well end up being forgotten. Because a woman can tolerate absence, yes, but not indefinitely. And when her mind adapts, when her heart finally stops beating, no longer waiting for someone who didn't know how to be present, there is no going back. He thought he could return whenever he pleased, that his mere presence would be enough to win you back. But he encountered something he never imagined possible. A woman who simply no longer needs him. A woman who holds no resentment, because she has found something infinitely better than revenge. Her own profound peace. A woman who understood, finally, that whoever leaves without reason does not deserve to return with excuses. That whoever ignores you exposes themselves to irrelevance. That whoever disappears risks never being found again. And that, my dear, is true strength. Not the kind that shouts, that demands, that imposes itself. The true strength is the quiet calm. It is the unwavering dignity. It is the absolute certainty that you do not need anyone else to choose you because you have already, irrevocably, powerfully chosen yourself. A woman can love deeply. She can give everything. She can hope and dream with all her heart. But when she gets tired, when she becomes disappointed one too many times, when she finally realizes that what she offered was not truly valued or held with care, her energy shifts. And once that shift occurs, nothing and no one can ever bring her back to the place she was before, because she learned how to live without him. And that is the freedom most feared by the one who thought he had everything under control. Because, in the end, the one who truly loses is not the one who was ignored, but the one who foolishly believed his silence would have no lasting consequences. This story is not just about love and heartbreak. It is about growth, about consciousness, about identity. It is an emotional journey that many have walked, and from which only some manage to emerge stronger, wiser, more profoundly at peace. Because when a woman chooses herself, when she stops placing her value in the hands of others, when she understands that what she truly deserves will never make her doubt her worth, everything changes. And you, who are reading or listening to this right now, perhaps you are already at that point. Or perhaps you are searching for it, taking your first steps down this path. Whatever stage you are in, remember this core truth. Your value does not depend on anyone else's presence, attention, or approval. Your strength is born from your capacity to gently release what does not nourish your soul and to firmly embrace what does. Because sometimes the greatest, most powerful declaration of self-love is simply closing a door and choosing not to look back.